Hey Redskins, today we're going to talk about the Buttercup top. The Buttercup top has buttons, and not everybody's comfortable with making buttonholes, so that's what we're going to hope to help you out with a little bit. You're going to need some tools to get a good buttonhole. So you need something to mark your fabric. Chalk, pen, whatever works and actually shows up on your fabric. You're going to need something to cut the buttonhole when it's time. Seam ripper or thread snips, whichever works best for you. I personally like the thread snips, but a lot of people use seam rippers. The buttonhole foot. This should come standard with your machine. If not, you're going to need to go find one. Amazon sells them. The button foot. This is to actually sew on the actual button with your machine. If you don't have one of these, a normal foot sometimes works, but it's a lot finickier. Otherwise, just hand sew it. A couple of pins, and you'll see why in a little bit. Your button, of course, and this one's a little bit different. You need stabilizer. This is for an embroidery machine, but basically anything that can tear away really easy is what you're gonna need. This will strengthen the buttonhole. See how nice and easy that was to rip? This will strengthen the buttonhole and make it last longer. This is especially helpful when you're doing a knit top like the Buttercup. And then of course you're gonna need your project. Now I'm not gonna use a full project because otherwise this tutorial will be very long. So you'll see I've sewn it like it's a placket and it's interfaced. So that's what we're gonna use to get started. All right, ready for this? Let's get started. All right, time to do our button. Okay, let's get our machine set up for buttons. Pick your buttonhole. On mine, it's numbers 34 through 41. I'm gonna do 35, which is a nice standard rectangular button. Next up, we will need our buttonhole foot. The buttonhole foot has this slide part on the end. You're gonna slide your button in between those pieces. This makes these pieces a set distance apart. This distance is the perfect size for this button. If you find your button is too large for the buttonhole, you can, I don't know. I've never had that problem. But a shank button often doesn't fit if you have shank buttons instead of hole buttons. If you find you're going to use a shank button, my recommendation is to find a same size button that'll fit right here, because otherwise you're going to run into difficulty with the shank button popping out. I have had that happen before. Okay, so then on your machine you have a slider back here that is for buttonholes. If your machine doesn't come with a slider, you're going to have to look at your manual because I don't have experience with that. That slider needs to go between these two pegs. So let's put that foot on. Make sure our slider's between our pegs and the machine is set up. Now, I've already done one buttonhole. As you can see, there's a little bit of whiteness left from the embroidery stabilizer. And I'm going to demonstrate to you the difference between a perpendicular and a parallel buttonhole on an edge. Mark where you want your button to be. Yours is going to be far more particular than me just arbitrarily picking something. Okay. Now, a buttonhole is sewn from the edge closest to you backwards and then back forwards again. If you start your buttonhole here, it's going to go up here where you don't want it. So start on the end. Slide it where you want it so that you can see it through the guide hole. And if you're sewing it parallel to the edge, make sure your fabric is parallel to the buttonhole. It acts as a nice guide. Now my fun little trick is to take this embroidery stabilizer, once you have that where you want it, and pop it right on top, like that. I like to sew my buttonholes from the wrong side of the garment because it does leave a little bit of residue, not really residue, like fiber from the stabilizer that you don't really want on the front, but it's fine. Okay, so put your needle down, and so you're going to very gently make sure this stays where you want it, but you are not going to force it or your buttonhole will end up the wrong size. And go slow, there is no rush with buttonholes. The faster you go, the more likely your machine is to make a mistake. Now, mine's been acting up all day because I'm using very old thread. When you're doing buttonholes, you want to use thread that, like in fishing, when you have fishing line that stays curly forever, that's bad. It doesn't cast properly. The same is true with thread. It doesn't go through your machine properly if it's been on a spool for years. But I wanted to use crazy colored thread so that you'd be able to see exactly what the machine is doing. Now when your machine starts going in the same spot up and down, you know you're done. And it made a mistake again because of this old thread, but it will work for our purposes. I strongly recommend using newer, good thread when you're doing your buttonholes. I'm using this, which when you pull it off, it keeps the curl. That's bad. It's very old. I got this thread in high school. I'm 30 now, so that's fun. Okay, so once you have your buttonhole stitched, pull away the stabilizer. See, nice and clean. Super clean on the front. Now you're going to take those 2 pins I told you to get, and you are going to guide them right along the edge. So right before the end stitching on your buttonhole. This is going to keep you, when you're cutting the buttonhole open, from going through that stitching, or at least make it a little harder. I mean, if you're really determined, you'll go through it. Now you can use a seam ripper to just puncture through, and then at the little fork, it'll get caught on the pin and won't go further. I like to use scissors, same concept. Just cut. This is Ponte, so it's a bit stiffer than what you will be using, I'm sure. Because Ponte doesn't really have the required stretch for this shirt. Cut, cut, cut. I would have used good thread for this, but all my good thread is black and white, and then you can't actually see it. Oh, then you pull this out, and you have a buttonhole. You may need to, if your fabric is finicky and thick like mine, you might need to cut in a little bit closer, but that guide helps with the initial. Okay. Okay, we are going to stitch on a button. We need to use this foot, if you have it. A regular foot, again, will work, but if you're using a regular foot, you need to put your feed dogs down. You don't want it feeding while you're sewing the button on. You just want it to stay in one place. Now you use a zigzag stitch. Mine is stitch 4, yours may be different. Put your button where you want it. Then put it through here like this. Now very carefully and very slowly, see? Oh, I'm hitting the button and it's not the right spot. Line it down. There we go. I went through the first hole. Check that it goes through the second hole. If it works, do a few stitches. There's no right or wrong answer there on how many. Then feed it in. Check. Okay. Check the other one. Good, goes through. If you forget to check the second hole, it's very likely that you will hit the button and the force of your machine is quite possibly going to crack that button in half, which I did earlier because I wasn't paying attention. Okay, so Clean it up. You'll see your button is very secure. Once you have your button sewn on, let me show you how these work. With a perpendicular buttonhole, when you're wearing your shirt, your bust will stretch this way. See how the placket stays nice and flat? That's what you want. That's why we do our buttonholes on shirts perpendicular. But if you go in the parallel one, when your bust is pulling, because let's face it, most of ours do, it bunches instead of laying flat because of the way the button is pulling. So I recommend doing them perpendicular when you are doing your buttercup top. Alright guys, I hope that tutorial helped you out just a little bit. And as always, we would love to see your final project over in the Rad Patterns discussion group on Facebook. See you there!